Unit 3. Family Relationship. Page 73. Focus on reading. Task 2.
Teen terror. A father was jailed last week for restraining his daughter. George Trimble was jailed for a few hours last week for physically trying to prevent his 15-year-old daughter Susie from going to see her boyfriend. He held her by the wrist, but she managed to escape. Later, she told the police he'd assaulted her, and he was held at the station for questioning. Susie has now dropped the assault charges, and the family is trying to patch things up. George's story. I am a respectable businessman, and all I'd be trying to do was keep my daughter away from drugs and bad company, and I ended up in a police cell. I've got two daughters, Helen and Susie. Helen's 17 and Susie's 15. I've had no trouble with Helen, apart from a bit of bulimia. Susie's the problem. She used to be a lovely girl with her dolls and toys, but a few months ago her behavior started to deteriorate. She started dating people who were much poorer than her and staying out later at night. It was really worrying and annoying. Her American boyfriend was colored and much older than her, not at all suitable for her. We had some rows about this, and after one row she stormed out and went missing for a whole weekend. I think she was taking drugs. So then I started physically to stop her going out. But one night she went out when we'd gone to bed, and in the early morning the police brought her home. So I told her, "You see what happens?" I told her she'd only got herself to blame. After that I hoped she would start listening to me, but she didn't. Then last week she wanted to go out again. I had had enough. I told her, "You're going to do as I tell you." But she shouted she'd do what she liked. I grabbed her by the wrists, but she pulled herself free and ran out of the house. I was sick with worry. And then the police came and arrested me for assault. I was taken to the police station like a common criminal. After a few hours they released me on bail, and I haven't been charged. But it was really unpleasant. I'm just a normal father trying to save my little girl. My girls were lovely when they were younger. I drove them to piano lessons and drove them back. My wife always made sure they were dressed really nicely. We gave them everything we could, the sort of things I never had when I was a child. They were my pride and joy. I don't understand this rebellious stuff. I never spoke back to my parents. I never went out drinking. In those days, if you didn't like something, you just put up with it. I was working when I was 16, and I've spent my life building up a business for my family so they would have a better future. And now this. I feel like my world has fallen apart.
Unit 3. Page 81. Focus on listening. Task 3.
Listen about Penny Palmano.
It might be difficult to accept, but a new approach to dealing with rude or difficult teenagers is for parents to look at their own behavior. The key to getting teenagers to respect you is to respect them first, says Penny Palmano, who has written a best-selling book on teenagers. You can't continue to treat them the same way that you have been treating them for the previous 12 years. They have opinions that count. Imagine if you'd spent 2 hours getting ready to go out for the evening and someone said, "You're not going out looking like that, are you?" You'd be very upset. You'd never say that to an adult because it shows a total lack of respect. Palmano, who has a daughter aged 19 and a 16-year-old stepdaughter, has even allowed the children to hold several teenage parties at their home. They passed without problems. I found that if you have brought them up to do the right thing and then trust them to do it, usually they'll behave well, she says. I make them sandwiches and leave them alone, but I make it clear that they have to clear up any mess. I've never had a problem. In fact, the kitchen was sometimes cleaner than I'd left it. She agrees that teenagers can be irritating, enjoying a world that is free of responsibility, yet desperate for independence. She doesn't think, however, that they are trying to annoy you. Until recently, scientists assumed that the brain finished growing at about the age 13, and that teenage problems were a result of rising hormones and a desire for independence. But it turns out that the region of the brain that controls judgment and emotions is not fully mature until the early 20s. This would explain why many teenagers can't make good decisions, control their emotions, prioritize, or concentrate on several different things at the same time. For example, they may find it difficult to make the right decision between watching television, ringing a friend, or finishing their homework. It means that they do not intentionally do the wrong things just to annoy their parents, says Palmano. The key to happiness for all, Palmano believes, is calm negotiation and compromise. If you want your teenagers to be home by 11 p.m., explain why, but listen to their counter-arguments. If it's Saturday, you might consider agreeing to midnight rather than 1 a.m., which is what they had in mind. If they are up to 20 minutes late, don't react angrily. Instead, ask if they've had a problem with public transport and let it pass. They've almost managed what you asked. She urges a bit of perspective about other things too. There have been times when my daughter's room has not been as tidy as I expected, but as she said once, I'm a teenager. What do you expect? I'm not turning into a criminal. That's just clothes on the floor. It's vital to choose your battles carefully. Don't criticize teenagers for having an untidy room and then suddenly criticize them for other things. On these occasions, parents tend to mention all the other things that they may or may not have done wrong. 1 minute, it's about an untidy room, and the next, you're saying, and another thing, and criticizing them for everything.
Unit 3, page 93. Check your English. Task 3.
Listen to the story.
The perfect family. Divorce. That's a word I dreaded more than any other word in the English dictionary. All my life I thought I had the perfect family. Perfect parents, 2 great sisters and a younger brother. We all got along well. But during the last several years, my parents had started to quarrel more and more. My dad came home less and less, working more hours than ever. And now here we are, all sitting in the living room as a family, with my parents saying they had an announcement to make. There was that nightmare word, that one that made me sick to my stomach. They were, my parents said, getting a divorce. The big D word. My sisters and brother and I gaped at each other. How many times had I asked my mom and dad, "Are you getting a divorce?" How many times they had assured me that it would never happen and given me hugs and kisses. "This is some sort of April Fool's joke, right?" I said. My mom's eyes were full of tears. She held me in her arms. "No, Mark. I'm sorry," she whispered. My mom told me that we would have to leave her home, the home I'd lived in all my life. I felt like losing everything. My family, my dad. We moved into a tiny house with my mom's parents. At first, I wasn't happy. The house was small. Sometimes I felt there wasn't enough room to breathe. There was one thing, however: we loved each other. Visiting aunts and uncles tried to do everything to fill the house with warmth and caring. My grandparents paid special attention to all of us kids. I have never felt so close to them in my life. They asked me about school and were actually interested. They asked me about my friends and my grades. We sat at the kitchen table and talked often. They could never replace my father, but they spread their warmth to all of us. I also learned that I was really loved by my family. They supported me. I have since learned to change that funny concept I had about a perfect family. Maybe a perfect family really means a lot of love and a lot of support. Maybe it really means giving, sharing, and caring. Maybe I still have a perfect family after all.